So I'd best show you the output of this tutorial because it's a long one, and here we have our alien planet with a little bit of compositing and the sun thrown in. So let's get on and do something. Let's make an alien planet. Now there's a number of these tutorials around, but many of them don't go into a huge amount of detail and they use pre-existing textures. Well, we're going to make our own, and the first thing to do is to start with Blender and to do a number of explanations. So I'm going to delete the basic cube, pressing X, hitting delete, and then I'm going to add a sphere, a UV sphere. I'm going to scale it up to a reasonable size. One of the things with Blender is you'll find that if you're modelling a big object, it's best to make it big, and this is absolutely fine, the default settings, because what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the modifiers panel over here, and we're going to add subdivision surface, and we're going to take it up to a level of maybe 3, and this will never be applied. Do not apply this because you will get huge numbers of faces. Just leave it as it is. Now if I turn that off for a moment, because I'm not going to use it for the moment, you will see that what we have on here is a number of vertices, and if I go into wireframe you can see that more easily, and a number of faces. Now on the top here we've got a single face, and that's absolutely fine. There's no need to play around with that, but I need to make a point, and that point is quite simply that Blender will treat this when it comes to texturing as though there are a number of triangles coming out from the center, although there aren't. And the thing is that when we come to make a texture, it's going to be rectangular, so at the top and the bottom what is a square area on our texture is going to become tapered and compressed horizontally, and nowhere more so than at the top. And this is worth bearing in mind when you make your textures, and it's the only reason that I'm showing you this. So we'll go back to solid mode. Now let's go and make some textures. And how am I going to do that? Well, I'm using GIMP, which is a nice free paint program, and I have here from my artist friend Alan Kingwell 2 of his acrylic pours which are intended to represent planets. Now I don't like all of the details on each of these planets, but I like some of the details on all of them, so I'm going to combine these images to make my planet, and I'm going to draw my own texture. So we'll start off by opening a new file, and the first thing is a word on the dimensions of that file. Now we need to make the width of this a reasonable width because we want a decent resolution on our planet. So I'm going to make this 4000 wide. When doing, oh, didn't mean to do that. Start that again. Okay, I'm going to make this 4000 wide. I hit return and it automatically then creates the image. Now when you're doing these rectangular images that wrap around a sphere, the important thing to remember is the aspect ratio, otherwise you'll get it wrong. It has to be twice as wide as it is high. So our height needs to be 2000, and that gives us the correct aspect ratio because it wraps around. If you think about it, from top to bottom of the planet, it's going to be a single measurement. Effectively it's the diameter of the planet, but to wrap around the planet it needs to be two diameters, and that's why you need this ratio to be right. Otherwise you're going to get all sorts of unpredictable tiling and stretching effects. So we'll hit OK on that. Now I said I'm going to take the bits that I like, which is what I'm going to do, and the bit I like on this image is, well, the bits that I like on this image is basically this whole area around here. So I'm going to cut that out, and the way to do that in GIMP is quite easy. We'll take our tools, we hit the lasso tool, and we simply go around and cut it out. In fact, I think I'll have that bit of blue there as well. Now the cloud layer we're going to do as a totally separate thing, and that's going to be done using textures, what is called a procedural layer. So I'm not at all going to worry about clouds here. What I'm going to worry about is the actual base area, the ground itself, and forget about everything else. This is why I'm trying to avoid white areas as much as possible. There. Edit and copy. Go back to our edit, and I'm going to paste as a new layer, and there's a reason behind that. So there we have it, and we're going to do something like that. In fact I'm not, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this to disguise our join, because here we've got a join because this will wrap around the planet, so this end will join to that end of the image. So what I need to do is to actually split this in half and put a half of it on one side of the planet and a half of it on the other. So how am I going to do that? Well, the first thing I need to do is to flatten this image. I need to take this and put it roughly halfway through here. Edit, cut, and edit, and paste. And we need to move it. So I'm going to move this to the actual edge of our planet there. Now I'm clicked on the top ruler there and I'm bringing down the guideline so I can see where the top of that actually comes. Now I'm going to take this part, oops, need to adjust that a bit, hang on, image, I need to flatten it again before I do that, that's better. Now I need to take this part do exactly the same thing, only this time I'm going to move it over here like that, down a bit so that it corresponds with the guideline, so it will actually line up with this part of the image here. And flatten the image again, and I'll need to get rid of the original area there, like so. Now if I save this I can test it, and I'm going to keep doing this, I'm going to keep saving and testing. So export as, find my area there, and I'm going to save it as surface texture.jpg, and what extension you put on there when you export determines what type of file that GIMP creates. So I'm going to export that, so, and now back to our jolly old friend Blender, and we're going to go into materials, new, going to make sure we're set to cycles, use nodes, going to rename this planet, this material surface, and now we're going to go over here into what is the compositing node, but hey, it's also, so we want to edit shader nodes by clicking there, and this is the material we've just created. So I'm going to add in our image texture, connect that to color. I'm going to add in a input texture coordinates, and I'm going to choose to use generated, which is an automatic setting for the vectors, and the important thing is to change this from flat to sphere. You can see now we've kind of lost that. There's still a little defect down here. I'll take a note of where that is. It may be that we've actually got the same problem on both sides, so I'm going to fix that and then I'll come back to you. I'm only going to do the same thing again. And that's worked, so here we are, all fixed. Now we can't see that there's a join there, which was the purpose of doing this exercise. Right, so now I'm going to add some other parts that I like onto our image. So we'll minimize Blender. I'm going to come back to this one here now. And what I like from here is this whole green brown thing that's going on around this area. And so I'm going to see, I don't really want huge amounts of the black, so I'm going to pick this whole area around here. Once again, lasso tool, trying to avoid as much as that white cloudy stuff as I can. Copy, edit, and paste. And you can see that I've got this here now. So and there's things that I can do with this. I can rotate it, I can play about with it. In fact, that's what I think I'm going to do. I'm going to rotate it. You see you've got the nice helpful little button there. I'll rotate it that way. I'm going to rotate it like that. Hit rotate. I can grab it and move it. And place it there. And I'm going to carry on like this until I've got a mosaic of areas on this planet that I can play with. So have fun, and I'll come back when I've done that. So now I've got that. That's as much as I want. So I've got to fill in all these areas, and these are going to be mostly C, not all C, but mostly C. So how am I going to do that? Well, I'll start off with my lasso tool again, and I want to pick an area of blue. So I'm going to take this area here, like that, edit and copy. Now whenever you've got something in the clipboard in Blender, it actually comes in as a part, as a brush. So if I go to select none, get rid of that little border there, and I can make a new selection, select by colour, and just select the whole background, and I can feather that selection. If I go into the select menu, feather 10 pixels, and then I can go into the brush menu, and if we click on the brush type, we can see we've got, that was the area that we selected there. So if I just quickly stamp that on there, you can see. And I'm going to take the size up somewhat. Going to change the angle a little bit. And then all I'm going to do is just stamp this about, because of this white line. And I'm going to put some angle on it. You can see what I'm doing. I'm building up this sort of coastline effect here. And of course I can do anything I like with that area, and then I'll come in and select another shape and just rinse and repeat, really. Now, another thing you can do is you use some brushes that are built into Blender, and these are some of them are quite unique. This one, for example, Cello 2. And what I can do is I can pick a colour off here. I can pick, say, that colour. Turn the opacity right the way up. And this particular one, Cello 2, is quite good for blending stuff out. And what I want to do is leave this texture in the middle completely alone. All this stuff that Mr. Kingwell has so excellently achieved, I want to leave it untouched. So, here we are, and I've done with that bit of tidy up now. All that's left is to do the polar ice caps, and I'll do that in a second. First of all, I'm going to check exactly what I've done. I'm going to reload our texture and have a look around. And that's kind of what I was expecting. Now you'll notice the colours seem washed out. That's because I've changed the background so we can see all around the globe. Now, as you can see at the moment, the ice caps are just like that, and we need to do something about these ice caps. So, taking a note of the extent of the ice cap goes down to about the extent of the geometry there, and the ice cap over here must overlap some of the geometry. So what I need to do now is go back to our image and put in the ice caps. So how am I going to do that? Well, once again I'm going to use our wonderful lasso tool, and I need to zoom out from this image a bit. Let me see, something like that, and I'm going to draw on here the actual shape of our ice cap, like this. Making sure that when I get to this right hand end that I finish at around about the same position, like that. And I can just complete the box, this selection box, and now wherever I draw is only going to be in there. So I'm going to pick a colour which is going to be a blue-white, something like that. and the brush is just going to be a straightforward one, 100% opacity, because all I'm aiming to do at the moment is fill this with colour. And I want to be a bit bigger than that with the brush to make life easy on myself, and all I'm going to do is just fill this with colour. Now I might actually have to adjust that very shortly, we'll see. Now for the ice cap on the other side, I'm going to repeat exactly the same procedure. I'm going to draw it using my lasso tool, bearing in mind that it will overlap here and land. Something like that. Now remember, if you screw this up, you can always use undo, so long as you keep GIMP open. Why am I saying that? Because I may have screwed it up. No, actually that looks okay. Right. Now for the next stage is to add a bit of detail in there. Now our own ice cap, we have mountain ranges which are exposed, and this would doubtless have the same. So I'm going to do a colour selection with that colour that we've just drawn. Now you can see all of that colour we've just drawn is actually selected. I'm going to select a mountain type colour from the image that I've already got, something like that. I'm going to go into paint, and the brush I'm going to be using is going to be not cells but our acrylic, which gives us a much better. And I'm going to just do a test mark here, like so. So that's absolutely fine, and it's not going to draw at all over the area which isn't selected, which is cool. So now we've got that, and now I want to introduce some texture over the rest of the area, and to do that I'm just going to add some plain white. And you can vary this texture obviously as much as you want. In my particular case this isn't going to be particularly noticeable, I fear. And that's good. And for my next trick, I need to somewhat break up these areas. So I'm going to invert my selection, And now the only place we can draw is in the ice cap area, and I'm going to choose a different brush, and to show you what that looks like I'll plonk that in there. Oops, no I won't. Hang on just 1 minute. I want to change my colour. The colour I'm going to be using is the ocean type colour. I need to make this brush smaller. And just break it up in a few areas, that's all. That's all that's required. Something like that. If I take the select off, we're starting to get there. In fact, that will very possibly do. So let me just save that. Whoops. File, export, and go back to GIMP. Reload our image. And there we have a reasonable sort of texture. That's kind of what we want. So, just save that file just in case. Come out of there, and what I want to do is I want to do some overall colour adjustment now. Start off with hue and saturation, and we're not going to change the hue. I do want to boost the saturation up a little bit though, because that will help when it comes to render. That's okay. And look at brightness and contrast. Will it help if we take the contrast up? No, not particularly. If we reduce it, no, not particularly. So I'm going to cancel that and apply an overall filter. And there's lots of different filters you can apply. And the first one I'm going to apply is unsharp mask filter, which will help to bring out some of the details. And you won't really see the effect except on a small scale. And then I'm going to put them, this might sound a bit insane, but I'm going to put the details back a bit using the blur node, blur mask, like that, and that will do. So what we need now is a bump map, and to do that basically I'm going to create a bump map from this and then resave it. So the first thing I want to do is resave this file with a different name, and I'm just going to call it bump map. Now I've done that, the way these maps work is that anything that's dark is low, anything that's white is high. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take those whites and I'm going to colour them a light grey. and I'm going to do that using the colour selection tool. And this particular light grey is going to be our middle ground. And now what I want to do is I want to take all the dark areas and I need to colour them white. Because this is going to be where our mountains are, and I'm going to put a texture on those later. So using the colour select tool, I'm going to select everything that's dark, and I can change the threshold on that. Like so. And all of these areas are going to be our mountains, and I think if I hit the shift key I can add to that, which I can, but that threshold was too much, so I can go edit, undo, select colour by colour, and take this right the way back down to maybe 10 or 15. Shift, select some of these other darker areas which aren't yet covered, and now we have all of our mountainous areas. So everywhere here that's white, that's selected, is going to be a mountain, and if I go back and I can paint over these with white, like so. And now I need to select everything that's land, and no, I need to select everything that's not this. So I'm going to go into select, invert that selection, and paint it a mid-neutral grey. To increase the size of that brush to make it a bit easier. That. And you can see we've still got some dark spots which we missed, and that's easy to deal with because we can just select, colour select our light grey, invert that selection, go back to our white, and repaint. Like that. And that then is our rough bump map. Now what I need to do is to create some variation in this, and the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to take our white and I'm going to dull it down, not too much, so that we have kind of a middle ground, something like that. And I'm going to use one of these brushes, and I'm not sure which one yet. I need to see what they look like. I can't remember with all of them. So that, yeah, that looks good. So I'm going to undo that, take the size down a bit, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to colour select just the white, and I'm going to stamp this, and obviously it's only going to affect the white areas, and it will just give us that little bit of height variation that we want. In our image, which is difficult to see until I take the select off. But there you can see you have some variation in our bump map. And the last thing I want to do is I want to blur it, because you don't want all these to be straight-sided cliffs. So I'm going to go into Gaussian blur, and how much am I going to blur it by? Well, rather more than that, I think. Something like 9 would be fine. And I'm going to repeat that. And that will do. Now that is our bump map. So I'm going to save that. And the next thing we want is a specularity map. Now, a specularity map defines which areas are glossy, and the only areas which are glossy are in fact the oceans. So the whole thing's going to wind up black except for the ocean colours. So once again we're going to be using colour select, and I need to manage to select most of the oceans. So threshold up a bit. And that looks reasonable. We're getting there. We've gone a bit too far. So I'm going to undo that last one because that went a step too far. Started selecting pixels from inside the land. So I want to turn the threshold here down again a bit. And I think that will do. So all of this area is going to be our white, the rest of it is going to be black. So what I need to do is to invert this selection use a nice black. Invert it again. Make it white. And I think that will do. So there we have our specularity map. Save that. I'm just going to call it specularity. And that defines the areas that are glossy. So, it's back to Blender. So, I'm going to start. We already have our planet surface, which is here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a mix shader, because we need to mix gloss. Going to add in a gloss shader, then we want our image texture, and we're going to take the same vector, make sure that it's set to sphere, and we're going to open up our specularity, and the colour is going straight to our factor. Now I'm not sure if I've got this the right way around, we'll soon see. So if down here I go to rendered, and we can see that in fact I do have it the right way around, because that's very, very reflective. In fact it's much too reflective, but that's easy. So there's a number of different ways I can do that. Can I remember if I can apply a maths node to that? I think I can actually. So I'm going to apply it as a multiply, something like 0.1. And now you can see I've got a shine on the ocean. As that moves over the land, the shine disappears, which is exactly what I want. Possibly 0.1 is too low. 0.2 in the maths node, and that's a bit better. So there, we've got that. Now, what we need to do now is we need to bump it, and to do that we're going to add the other image texture, once again we're going to take that generated output, going to add in a vector node which is the bump node, stuff that over here. We're going to take the colour, which will black, white, grey, that's going to go into the normal, and then the normal from the bump is going into displacement. Strength is going to be something like 0.5 maybe. And we need to open our bump map. And for some reason, oh yeah, I haven't changed the projection of the bump map to sphere. And suddenly all the bumps will be in the right places. So, what have we got? We've now got a 3D bump, but it's a bit too aggressive. And once again, we can fix that by adding in a maths node. Oh, I've got it set to add, that's why we want multiply. Which is there. .4, 0.3, and there we go. That's good enough, I think, for us. So you can see where we have mountains. We have bumps. Now, at the moment, there's no gloss at all on the land. You can see none. And you may want to change that, which you can do with an add node, adding a small amount of gloss onto the output. And I can actually, if I go into math, I can add that after the multiply. Whoops, it's gone in the wrong place, never mind. If I add 0.001 in there, reconnect my diffuse onto the shader. You can see whether that's enough to give a tiny bit of gloss on those mountains to help them stand up more. Point 0.005 maybe. Point 0.01 perhaps, and there you can see that there's a little bit of gloss on those mountains, which is helping them to stand out more, because no material is ever quite truly matte. So That's the planet taken care of. If I go back into default, we need to sort out the atmosphere, which is our next step. Now, if I change my world back to complete blackness, or very nearly complete blackness, do a quick trial render. I've got this in extreme close-up. I need to change that. Hang on, just hit the escape key. Go to camera view. It's going to rendered. And let's select a decent view. Something like that. We need to pull our camera out rather. And we'll render that. That world is still too much too light, isn't it? That's more like it. Now, I've tried to make the colours pop a bit on this, and the reason why is we're going to be putting an atmosphere over the top of it. But if the colours didn't really pop, then we wouldn't see much through the atmosphere. So let's put an atmosphere over the top, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to select our sphere here, and I need to rename that to be planet, and then I'm going to duplicate that, hit escape, scale 1.01, I think. Sorry, S1.01. And I need to rename that from planet 01 to be atmosphere. And it's going to have a new material, so I can take out the surface material, add a new material. Obviously I'm going to call that atmosphere, and we're going to go into okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change this completely. We're going to take out the diffuse, we're going to add in transparent shader, which is completely transparent. As you can see, if I bung this straight into the surface, it's completely transparent. Then we're going to add in a translucent shader. Many people make the mistake of using a diffuse shader, but clouds are actually translucent, thin clouds you can see through. And we're going to add in a mix shader to mix the two together. I'm not sure at the moment if I've got these the right way around for what I want to do. Now you might say, well, we didn't do a clouds texture, so how are we going to get the texture? And the answer is it's going to be procedurally generated. So we're going to start off with a Voronoi texture. Need to add in texture coordinate, input texture coordinates. Again, we're going to use generated. And our scale is far too high. I'm going to need to go away and play with this, otherwise this video is going to be several hours long. And this is what eventually it comes out at. So you can see the clouds are there. The clouds themselves have a little bit of 3D bump on them. The clouds cast shadows. The sun is shining through the atmosphere off the ocean. I think that's quite a good job. So, how did I do it? Quite a mess. Okay. So, oh, hang on. That's better. That's tightened it up a bit more. Right. So, we have two textures. We've got a noise texture, and I'll zoom in so you can stop the video and you can copy the values. We've got a Musgrave texture and a noise texture. They feed through a multiply node, a math node, factor of 0.873 at the moment, and it's the colour, not the factorial, that I'm taking. Then I run them through a colour map, colour ramp. Now what does that do? That increases the contrast. Now if I want to make the world a lot cloudier, I can quite simply click that shader, move it down there, and got a very cloudy world. If I want to make it a lot less cloudy, I can move it up there. It gives me control over the amount of cloudiness that there is. That then goes through a multiply node, which I don't need because it's set to 1, so I can delete that. did put that in originally, just so that I had some control, and then I realised it wasn't enough control, so I replaced it with the colour ramp. So that then is the factor of a mix shader. So all of these textures, they're just controlling this factor. Then I've got a transparent, which we knew about in the top, and the bottom shader comes from another mix shader, which is a mix between translucent and diffuse. And the reason I've done that is I found that with just the translucent I just couldn't get shadows under the clouds, and I wanted shadows under the clouds, so I've done a 50-50 mix between translucent and diffuse. That then obviously goes into from this mix surface shader, it obviously goes into the surface. Now the bump map, we take that same output there for the factor, put it into a bump node, run it through a multiplier node and into displacement, and that gives us our 3D cloud shapes. And that's about it for this tutorial. So if you've liked it, please like, share and subscribe. Thank you very much.